Praise the Lord, brothers and sisters, and thank you very much for joining us in this video. We hope and pray that you all are well and that your families are well and safe. Hopefully you have been blessed throughout this week. We do know that it is a very difficult week that we have experienced, but in everything we do give the Lord thanks, and we are always grateful for His goodness. Well, I'm sure you have seen the title and you are aware of what we'll be talking about today. I think it's very important for us to consider this topic. I try as much as possible to think about everything biblically and do everything as closely as possible to what we might see exampled by Jesus Christ in scriptures and by his followers throughout Christian history. And I've been really worrying about this whole dilemma that we're witnessing in our country, and it has been quite a thing to behold. But I think it's very important because as believers, we have to take into consideration that there are very few people in the world that really follow Jesus Christ. In fact, there are very few people in the church that really follow Jesus Christ. And because that is so prevalent, because that is so obvious, it is very important for Jesus' followers to really take their obligation to follow Jesus as seriously as they possibly can. And so I've really been praying and reading my Bible about some of the things that we're witnessing, praying and reading again, and trying as much as I can to wrap my head around what could serve as a serious solution. And to be honest, there are questions that come up. There are questions that come up in regards to my faith, in regards to the Christian responsibility, in regards to what can be done while maintaining the good Christian character. But what I am convinced of at this point is that there is no room at all in the Christian community to remain silent while the image of God is consistently desecrated at the hands of injustice and racial inequality. That is not an option. That is just not an option. It's not biblical. It's not Christian. It's not godly. It's not spiritual. However, I do believe that things must be done decently and orderly. So I want to take a few moments to talk about this, and I want us to consider a few things from the Word of God. Now, I want to first, before we get into the text and any further discussion, I want to just offer my prayers and condolences to the Floyd family. After watching that video and just reflecting on my own experiences, I personally have been accused and arrested for committing a crime that I did not commit at all. And fortunately for me, my outcome was drastically different from George Floyd's. And I'm really thankful for that, but my heart aches for what I saw in that video. It is the most savage thing to do to a person, and I cannot understand it for the life of me. I cannot get my head around what happened and what would move a person to cause that to happen. But I also believe in God, and I believe that God, he is behind the scenes doing something that in the future will bring some sort of peace for what has happened. I don't know how that would happen. I can't tell you that right now, but I trust God enough to believe that. But because of what I saw and because of what is being perpetuated within our country, I feel that it is absolutely expedient to talk about this. And there's a lot of tension around this subject, especially within Christian communities. And one may ask, why do you care? Why don't you just leave it alone? And why don't you just, let things pan out the way that they do? And why don't you just let the world do what they're going to do and let them take care of that, and you just be concerned with the problems within Christianity? Well, one of the reasons for that I elect not to remain silent is because, firstly, the problem of racism is not only present in the world, it is also present in the church and within the Christian community. If it were not present in the Christian community, then there wouldn't be such high tension on a discussion of how to embrace the problems and look towards forming Christian solutions towards the problem. The fact that we're not having those conversations, and the fact that we're allowing the judicial system to, in whatever way they decide to do it, to fix the problems of racial inequality in our country, it testifies to the fact that we're not concerned with it, we're not addressing it, and we're not doing things to eradicate the problem. The second reason why I can't just sit back and just let things pan out is because we don't see that example in the Bible. In fact, when we look in the Bible, we see that there is an intense and a strong commitment towards preserving one's ethnic and racial heritage while forming out of that an identity that is uniquely tied to Jesus Christ. In other words, God never called or never commanded that a person abandon their racial and their ethnic identity in exchange for a Christian one. What he does is he says, bring that ethnic identity and that racial identity forward and allow Christ to transform it so that it might look more like him. And he does that with every race and every ethnic, so that the objective becomes forming a community that is composed and comprised, should I say, of several different races, several different cultures, but because of Christ, we're all one. And we have a clear example of that in Romans chapter 10. And I simply pray the same prayer that Paul prayed in this text. He says in Romans chapter 10, verse number 1, "Dear brothers and sisters, the longing of my heart and prayer to God is for the people of Israel to be saved." In other words, I just want the people of which I belong to be saved. And I pray that prayer as Paul prayed within my own context. My heart's desire, my prayer is only that African Americans might be saved. Not African Americans alone, but all people. All right. Now, the problem with this sort of prayer for many people is that many feel that we should be praying for all people. Well, the problem, however, is when that suggestion is made, it blatantly ignores the fact that there are certain elements of injustice delegated towards the African American community that is not delegated to other races. And it avoids the responsibility of the Christ community to speak up for that race that is also a part of the Christ community, so that they might have an equal chance as everybody else in the world. Okay? So when I think about this text, Paul is addressing a notion that God has just thrown away Israel so that he might attain the Gentiles. Mostly like what we see in the world today, many people will say God has just thrown away the African Americans. Forget them. They're just ignorant. They're just absurd. They're just barbaric. They're just, hostile and radical. Forget them. Just get them out of the way. We'll just carry on with everything else. Well, Paul would say, no, don't do that. Grab your brother, speak up for him, pray for him, and create ways by which he can have the same life that you have. And so Paul says in Romans 11 that he answers this question: has God, in verse number 1, rejected his own people? He says, of course not. I am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, a member of the tribe of Benjamin. He's saying here, I am who I am. God has not gotten rid of me. I am still an Israelite. I'm just an Israelite that follows Christ. And brothers and sisters, I am a black man that follows Christ. And my heart aches at what is going on with those who are of the African American community. And as a Christian, I am obligated to speak out on it and defend those who are part of the race that I was happened to be born in. And so are you, whether you are black, white, or any other race, or any other color, should I say, brown, yellow, green, or blue. We all have a responsibility to speak up for one another because we are Christians and we are followers of Christ and we are believers of justice. Okay. Now, because of what's going on, there are a lot of hardships felt. As I pondered what's going on, as I thought about what's going on in our world, I thought about this in light of my faith, because I believe in God. I believe God is just. I believe God is present. I believe God is involved. He's here. He's not just stuck up in the sky, but he is present in creation, and he allows things to happen in a way that ultimately bring about his eternal will. So that causes me to question my faith and what I believe about God and the Bible. And here are 4 questions you might hear. I've actually heard this sort of thing kind of come up in conversation, implications of some of these questions. The first one is, if God really does exist, why is he allowing all of this to happen? Why did he allow George Floyd to die? Why did he allow him to be unjustly murdered by the hands of those individuals? Many people will conclude God must not be real if that kind of thing is allowed to happen. The second thing you would ask is that, or you might ask, is that if God does exist, does he care? Does he care that people are dying unjustly, that there are tons of Americans in the world that are living in deprived circumstances, that there are people in this world who are more subject to the tactics of evil and darkness than others? Does he care about that? The third question you might ask is, if he does care, then what is he going to do about it? Is he going to do anything about it at all? And then the last question you might be asking is, in the midst of all of this, what is the Christian responsibility? What are we supposed to be doing? And I want to answer those questions. But before we get there, I want to read the 94th Psalm, verses 1 through verse number 11. Because I feel like if the psalmist was living in our time, he would have penned these words in accordance to the moments that we're living in right now. He writes this: O Lord, the God of vengeance, O God of vengeance, let your glorious justice shine forth. Arise, O judge of the earth. Give the proud what they deserve. How long, O Lord? How long will the wicked be allowed to gloat? How long will they speak with arrogance? How long will these evil people boast? They crush your people, Lord, hurting those you claim as your own. They will kill widows and foreigners and murder orphans. The Lord isn't looking, they say. And besides, the God of Israel doesn't care. Think again, you fools. When will you finally catch on? Is he deaf, the one who made your ears? Is he blind, the one who formed your eyes? He punishes the nations. Won't he also punish you? He knows everything. Doesn't he also know what you're doing? The Lord knows people's thoughts. He knows they are worthless. I want you to think about these words, because I believe all of us can feel what these words meant to this psalmist, because most of us are saying these same words in some way, form, or fashion. Even the most devout Christian is pondering this sort of sentiment in some way, form, or fashion. I mean, we've seen all throughout the world the pain that is being felt. Not only have we witnessed the murder of a man unjustly, but in response to that pain, more pain is being caused. There are cops being killed. There are cops being wounded. And one thing we're finding out throughout this whole dilemma is that pain leads to more pain and death leads to more death. There's this circular experience that we're having because we are all dealing with our pain in some way, form, or fashion. I want to answer these questions that we posed earlier because I think it's important that we find out a way to stand up for individuals that are being victimized by this unjust system. So let's deal with the first question. Does God exist? And this question is posed in many different ways. In an evil world, does God really exist? And this is the thing we want to just kind of consider. Just because evil is present, it doesn't eliminate the existence of a good God. In fact, our story in the Bible, the narrative of the Bible tells us how this has come to be. And what we find here is that even though God made a good creation, and he made a creation that was pleasant and beneficial, he handed that creation over into the hands of mankind to steward it. And somehow or another, man was convinced to drop the ball. And ever since, we have been witnessing injustice. We have been witnessing people die and be victimized by those who are hostile to just and innocent people. In fact, the very first thing that happens the moment that man is kicked out of the garden and he is forced to live by the sweat of his brow, the first example that is given to us as a result of what has happened to the world is the murder of an innocent man. And so, brothers and sisters, when we think about these things, we ought not try to use this as a way to undermine the existence of God, but rather we should use it to build our hope. We should use it to create opportunities for a better day and use it as motivation that God has called us all to play a role in making this good creation even better. In fact, that is what it means to be a Christian. It doesn't mean to throw the creation away and bother yourself with something else, but rather to, through your Christian nature, to renovate, to restore the world that has fallen into a very grave condition, not of any fault of God, but because we as humans, the most virtuous beings in God's creation, we have dropped the ball. And no one can really teach the world how to do that better than a Christian, if you are really following Jesus Christ. That is why it's important for us to speak up in these sort of circumstances. The second thing that you might be asking, the second question was, does God really care? And the truth is, I believe, brothers and sisters, God's heart is aching even more than ours is. I want you to think about what it would be like to see your children. If you have children, you can understand the absurdity and the potential pain that you might experience from what I'm about to say. Imagine your children killing one another, fighting constantly, just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Out of all that you taught them, out of all that you gave them, out of all that you did to make them decent human beings, they just continuously killed one another. And brothers and sisters, even though we like to segregate each other by race and geographic location and where we come from and what we like or what we prefer, even though we like to draw those distinctions, God draws none of those distinctions. And the truth of the matter is, all of us are God's children in his eyes. And I believe, brothers and sisters, that the heart of God is bleeding. It is bleeding over what is happening in our country. I believe that God is in such pain and he is hurting so gravely over what is happening in our world, even far more than we could ever imagine that we are experiencing within ourselves. But the truth is God has already done everything he needs to do to make this world better. He has done everything. And that leads us to our next question. What is God going to do? Brothers and sisters, he has done everything he needs to do. He sent his son down here as an example of what it means to be human. He sent his son down here to take the punishment that he didn't deserve. He died on a cross that he didn't deserve. He got up the third day and gave us power that we didn't deserve. And the question still is, what is God going to do? Brothers and sisters, he's done everything he needs to do. All we need to do is follow and live within the power that he's given us through Jesus Christ. Now, for many people, that may be absurd, but I want you to try examining everything else that we have resorted to. And let's just consider objectively how beneficial has all of these things been. And if you would be honest, it hasn't reaped and it hasn't bear, should I say, much fruit. The real answer to the crisis that we're facing is Jesus Christ. And that's not a superficial answer. That's not a superficial explanation. It is rolling our sleeves up, praying through the scriptures, understanding what Jesus stood for, what he believed, what he taught, and then creating policies and examples so that the world can see what it means to be a universal family of God. It is up to us. And so the fourth question is this: what should we be doing? What should Christians be doing in response to racism in the world, and specifically in America? There are a few things I want to give you. The first thing is stand up. Be bold. Have courage. Don't sit back and sit on the side and let the world just completely decay itself. Don't do that. That is not the Christian thing to do. Don't sit on the side and just wait to go to heaven. That is unchristian. That is anti-Christian. The Christian thing to do is to be a witness. And the root word for being a witness implies that you ought to give your life. You ought to die. You ought to become a martyr. It is a serious responsibility for those who follow Jesus Christ. The second thing you ought to do is speak out. Your voice is far more powerful than you could ever imagine. Your words have power. You have the ability to influence people who may have a contrary opinion or a different idea about how this world should exist. And you speaking out just adds more power towards the effort of trying to create a better world, a more just world, a more righteous community. So speak out. Speak the words that Jesus spoke. Speak what it means to be a human from a perspective that is deeply rooted in the life of Christ. And you'll be able to change your circumstances and the circumstances of those who are around you. The third thing is we must live righteously. I know we're angry. I know we're frustrated. I know we don't want to deal with this. I know we're tired of it. I know we don't feel like this is fair. But out of all of that, brothers and sisters, we cannot afford to live in unrighteousness. I don't know anybody that was treated more unfairly than Jesus Christ. But yet the testimony is he was yet without sin. And so now my prayer is, Lord, help me to be bold. Help me to speak out. But while I'm doing this, help me not to sin. Because I understand that if I go along doing these things in a sinful manner, I no longer bring glory to your name, and I eliminate any possibility of truly being effective. All right? So let's think about how to do these things in a righteous way. And lastly, be wise. You have to be wise. Use wisdom. Ask the Lord to give you the words to say. Ask the Lord to give you the response that you must provide in the face of hostility. Because the truth of the matter is, we're not just living for ourselves. We're living for our families, for our communities, for our churches, and for the whole entire world. The world needs us. And we cannot afford for another innocent person to leave this life because they have lived in a lack of wisdom. So be wise. Allow the Lord to guide you in every move that you take, and you will bring glory to his name. And you will find out over a span of time, the world will begin to move in the right direction. Brothers and sisters, this is something to deal with here. And the world is slowly positioning itself for revival. I really believe that. But we as Christians, we have to do the right thing, and we have to do what is necessary. We have to have a biblical perspective, and I believe that we'll make it out of this thing all right. All right. Brothers and sisters, I hope this has helped you in some way. Listen, be safe out there. Okay? Be safe. Don't do anything silly. Okay? If you have to cry, cry in your homes. If you have to punch walls, punch the walls of your own home. If you have to beat down tables, beat your own dinner tables down. Do all that in private so that you can be heard in public. All right? Until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Take care, be safe, and God bless.